Hello and welcome back to the channel. This video today is about the definition of the term permanent establishment. And that is important because we have already seen just in the last video how important it is for the functioning or the application of Article 7 if there is a permanent establishment abroad or not. If there is one, you will have to pay taxes in the other country too. If there is none, you only pay taxes at home as an enterprise. So, as this term is so important, it's clear that you need a foolproof definition. That is given by Article 5.1 OECD Model Convention. So, in the beginning, before the rules are really set up, you have already a first definition so that you know about permanent establishment or not when you begin to read the proper text. According to that basic definition, a permanent establishment is a fixed place of business through which the business of an enterprise is carried on, either completely or partly. So, this basic definition is then illustrated by a mass of examples. 5.2 says, a permanent establishment is, for example, a place of management, a branch, an office, a factory, a workshop, a mine, an oil or gas well, a quarry, or any other place of extraction of natural resources, and so on. There is, by the way, one specific case or special case where where one can dispute about if something is a fixed, so permanent, longer lasting activity, or if it's just a simple single order. That is in the construction business or where installation projects are carried out, and so there one says a building site or a construction site or an installation project becomes a permanent establishment only if it lasts longer, and the threshold is here, the limit is 12 months. Why is, in case of a building project, something not always a single order? Well, just imagine you get the order to repair something, a broken roof in a house, 1 week at most. That's clearly a single order. So there you don't have a permanent establishment at the site. On the other hand, when you now get the order to take over the maintenance of the Cologne Cathedral, the Kölner Dom, then when you get that order, you begin at the bottom of the Cologne Cathedral, and when you are finished and arrived to polish everything and keep it in a good state, when you finish at the top of the Cologne Cathedral, you can begin again at the bottom. So when you get that job, you probably never leave Cologne alone again in the rest of your life. So that is something where you permanently are going to stay there. And that shows that when you have building or construction tasks, depending on the situation, there might be constellations where that is really a long-term and stable activity on the spot. So the legislator had to draw a line, and they were rather cautious. They said, okay, 12 months, that is long enough to see that at a permanent activity on the spot. Now, naturally, if you are active there for, let's say, 13 months, that brings along the existence of a permanent establishment. The building project becomes not a part of the activity of the head office anymore, but it turns into a permanent establishment. So you have to pay taxes on the spot according to the local rules, and not everybody likes that. So to avoid such complications, naturally people become inventive. They have creative ideas. The idea which immediately came to the mind of some construction firms, it's just to split up a single order into several parts. So company A executes one part of the necessary construction work and is present on the construction site, therefore only for 11 months. Let's say 11 months. It's an arbitrary figure. Then company B takes over another bit of the order, does some other work for 10 months. And company C then takes over and works there for 8 months. So you have splitted up the complete work to be done and distributed it to 3 different companies. This is perfectly legitimate. The only thing which makes it a trick is, well, imagine a multinational or a bigger group, or even a small or medium enterprise. These 3 companies could all belong to the same group of enterprises, so that there is a holding company on the top of all of them, which has them all under control, so that virtually, economically, if you look through the veil of civil law, then you simply have the same group doing all the work. It's rather a formal arrangement that the contract is split, that company A does a bit, company B signs for a bit of the work, and company C signs also for a bit of the work. This is purely artificial in a way to avoid that one single enterprise takes the whole activity, the whole order, and then has, let's say, 20 or 30 months work on the spot, which would trigger a permanent establishment. Now, this trick was so simple that it cannot really surprise that first people have used it, and second, that it a bit worried the fiscal authorities. So, together with the tendencies of recent years and decades to limit and cut back all these tax planning opportunities, it cannot surprise us that the double taxation treaties, after the changes made by the multilateral instrument and so, just have got some additional clauses which are meant to eliminate that contract splitting ideas. So that in such a case where closely related firms under control of the same enterprise share contracts on the same spot, that is all added together, and then every one of the 3 enterprises would be regarded as having a permanent establishment on the spot. Furthermore, there are certain other constellations where the basic definition of a permanent establishment rather creates some difficulties. For example, if you look at a warehouse or a storage room, there you store the finished product of an enterprise until a customer shows up and is willing to buy them, then you send it to the customer. It's not even a shop. There is no activity undertaken. Just the good lies around there, waits for being sent away. Now, you have a problem. If you qualify this as a fixed place of business, then you have the product, for example, produced in factory A and afterwards stored in room B. If now A and B are located in different countries, you have then to split up the total profit made from the sale of the product into one part, one share, which was caused by producing the product, and another share of the profit, which was caused by not throwing it away, but storing it. And that is evidently a bit hard to solve. Cost accounting can give you no convincing solution for that task. So nearly impossible. Now, what do you do as a wise person if you want to avoid being confronted with an impossible and insolvable task? You just define it away. For this reason, the OECD model traditionally just said, well, certain activities are not sufficient to turn something, a room or something else, into a permanent establishment. For example, a mere warehouse is not sufficient to trigger the qualification as permanent establishment. So if we just deny that the storage room is a permanent establishment, then we have only factory A as permanent establishment. Then everything which was earned by the production of the product is just attributed to being caused by the production factory A. Problem solved because problem was avoided in the first place. So with that idea in the background, you can understand Article 5.4, which says not regarded as a permanent establishment are the use of facilities solely for the purpose of storage, display, or delivery of goods or merchandise belonging to the enterprise, or the maintenance of a stock of goods or merchandise belonging to the enterprise solely for the purpose of storing, displaying, or delivering, the maintenance of a stock of goods or merchandise belonging to the enterprise solely for the purpose of being processed by another enterprise. So that frequent case that your customer says, I'm not willing to buy and pay your goods now, but please bring them to my location, store them there, and when I need them, I go there, take them out, and pay for them. So you would have a room, probably owned by one of your customers, where you store goods which still are yours, and the customer takes them out and pays when it needs them. In such a case, this room alone does not trigger a permanent establishment, which makes sense naturally. It's again the warehousing. Now, the maintenance of a fixed place of business solely for the purpose of purchasing goods, if you just want to buy the things there or just to collect information, that also shall not be qualified as a permanent establishment. Imagine you have an office room somewhere in Munich where the only thing which you do is you sit there, have a telephone receiver, put it to your ear, call people and buy stuff, which is then probably delivered to a warehouse somewhere else. Then the question, if you qualify that office now, it's a fixed place of business, yeah. If you would qualify now that office room as a permanent establishment, you would have to determine how much of the final profit of the whole business operation, purchasing, processing, finishing, storing, selling, how much of that whole profit which was generated was due to your taking the telephone receiver and ordering. And that's an impossible task. How much of the future profit do you cause by buying the raw material or the trading stock? Impossible. So they defined this out in a way. The maintenance of a fixed place of business solely for the purpose of carrying out for the enterprise of any other activity which is just of an unimportant quality. The maintenance of a fixed place of business, here you see that law experts are cautious solely for the combination of activities mentioned in subparagraphs A to E. So if you just combine buying something and storing it, this is not one of the cases explicitly listed in A to E, but naturally it's just the same. And so buying, storing, and delivering together does not constitute a permanent establishment because it's rather a combination of three or two insolvable problems. The whole thing is under the condition that the overall activity, if you combine these several activities together, still is of a preparatory or auxiliary character so that it does not constitute the whole activity. No? But in principle, buying, storing, delivering is not sufficient to turn something into a permanent establishment. That naturally became interesting when firms began to exist whose entire business consisted in buying products from the producers, storing them, and then sending them to customers, when the whole process was then managed from another location, for example, taking the orders by internet. Because this rule that mere warehouses did not constitute a permanent establishment then became a problem. Because then, under that definition, you could end up with situations where an enterprise could supply, let's say, the whole territory of Europe with its goods without having any permanent establishment outside its country of residence. Imagine the following idea and situation. You have a company which has its seat somewhere in state A, X, Y, or so, or X, Y. Now you set up warehouses everywhere near your customers in country A, B, C, D, and you deliver now from the warehouses to country A, B, C, D, others. And in this constellation, there is the risk that there is no permanent establishment in any country according to the traditional PE definition. So all your profits made everywhere in the warehouses in A, B, C, D cannot be taxed in the countries of A, B, C, D, but it all goes to your country of residence. There have been models like these. Naturally, that extreme constellation was already prevented partly by that additional condition that the qualification as a non-permanent establishment was restricted to cases where the activities undertaken in these rooms and the like were only of an auxiliary character. Now, if you perform a complete business cycle within the storage room, everything happens which has to do with the business operation, then it's difficult to say it's only auxiliary. But here again, you can make an easy trick. You just do some activity splitting. For example, you have a warehouse, and some of the activities there, storing and putting things in the shelves are done by a company A, and some others are done by company B. For example, packaging and sending to the customers. So in that case, company A only uses the warehouses for not a complete business operation, but auxiliary and preparatory things, putting things on shelves. The other part of the activities, taking things down from the shelves and putting them into a package, is also rather auxiliary. And so that activity splitting could also be used to avoid qualification as a permanent establishment. For this reason, the multilateral instrument and the OECD model convention in the newest version reacted and said, okay, if several companies closely related to each other undertake activities like these together, then this can lead to the whole thing being qualified as a permanent establishment for both of them, because here that is simply to be regarded as a trick. A last aspect which we need to mention is that one could also easily avoid the setting up of a permanent establishment by operating via a local agent who looks for customers, concludes contracts, and you fulfill them. Because that could lead to a stable and constant activity in a certain market without that you have to own some premises or fixed buildings or so of your own. On the other hand, it would mean that you constantly work in that market, and it could make it easy to avoid owning an own permanent establishment. Imagine you have an enterprise in state A, and for your activities you need a shop or building in state B necessary for selling the goods there, or you need office rooms there for your activities. And if you have them, that would constitute a permanent establishment for you. So your clever idea is, I don't want that. I just appoint somebody as my agent. So you know an agent is somebody who looks for customers, convinces them to conclude a contract with you, and gets paid a commission by you for his, her, or its efforts. Now, if you had taken an employee there, the employee had probably needed an office room. The office room would have been your permanent establishment. That ruins everything. Now you just employ an independent or an agent. And the agent, if the agent needs an office room, the agent rents an office room and pays for it. This is now not your office room. If the agent says it would be a good idea to show the goods to customers, then the agent rents the building or owns the building, and so the building is no longer your building, so it's no longer your permanent establishment. So under the basic rule, no longer a permanent establishment. The enterprise itself has no longer a PE. Nevertheless, you constantly are present in the market, you earn money there, you have a stable organization there set up. So the general conclusion is using an agent to work with the market can be a clever trick to avoid the existence of a permanent establishment in a foreign market in the long way. And so one should close that loophole and say, okay, having an agent constantly works in a certain market for you and obtains contracts which you then fulfill. That is just an equivalent to a permanent establishment. Indeed, the double taxation treaties do this. They set up the general rule that getting active in a market of a foreign country by an agent is an equivalent of having a PE there. So the existence of an agent leads to a permanent establishment, a fictitious one, for the principal, so the guy or the firm who uses the agent to work in the market. In such cases, you need to distinguish logically between the profit which the agent makes from the orders. The agent gets, if he or she obtains an order, gets a commission paid by the principal, a remuneration. Yes, you were successful, you convinced somebody to sign a contract, you get, let's say, 10% of the revenue which we make. Here it is. And the agent will have own business expenses, so the profit which the agent makes is commission minus costs. This is probably under all circumstances taxable in that country, because we can reasonably assume that the agent lives in the country of the customer. So that is not what our 5.5 DTT is about. The profit of the principal is what 5.5 focuses on. The principal also makes a profit from the activity of the agent. The principal gets revenue from the order signed by the customer. And now the principal has own costs, that is the costs of the goods or services in question, and the commission which has to be paid to the agent. So that is the profit which the principal makes from that activity, and that is where Article 5.5 of the OECD model aims at. That is what is deemed to be the profit of a fictitious permanent establishment of the principal in the country of the customer. However, if you always say everybody who has somebody who looks for customers there who buy your products, you could debate if that also covers a trader, an independent business partner who buys your goods and sells them, or an independent agent who just is not under your control or so. So including independent traders also in the definition of agents would probably complicate international trade strongly. So there was an exception made there, and naturally it cannot surprise that later people who wanted to save taxes and who wanted to avoid the qualification or having permanent establishment abroad just tested out the exact delineation or delimitation of what is an independent trader. So very often constructions were used where somebody was looking for contracts but still clearly avoided the qualification of an agent, so that you had no permanent establishment in that foreign country and had to pay no taxes there. For this reason, the definition of agent in the DTTs has also been adjusted and modified, for example, by the multilateral instrument in order to bring that in line with modern developments and to avoid that the principal can avoid paying taxes in a country, although there is a stable organization which constantly works in the market. Well, yeah, the cases where the use of an agent leads to a fictitious permanent establishment in that market are rather specific, so we are not going to talk about details here. This is rather a rule which is meant to prevent certain models which otherwise could avoid the existence of a permanent establishment. Yeah, the last remark which I have to make is, however, that having a subsidiary company in the other country, so you are a German company and you set up an Italian subsidiary company, that the mere existence of a subsidiary company which is owned by you in that other country does not automatically constitute an agent. So a subsidiary company, even owned 100% by you, is still another person which is independent, and so it does not automatically turn that subsidiary into an agent of yours, and does not automatically entail the existence of a permanent establishment for you in that other country. That is already a very long-standing principle, and it has already existed for decades, and it has still been upheld also after the modifications by the multilateral instrument. So it would still be wrong just to say we have a subsidiary in, let's say, France, so we have an agent there, or this is an agent for us. That would be a wrong conclusion. No, the mere holding of shares in another company doesn't trigger the agency problem. Okay. Yeah, that shall be enough for today's little lecture. Thank you for watching, if you watched it. Thank you for other things if you did other things. And I hope to see you soon back on the channel. Don't forget to press from time to time that little like button, perhaps because it's over now, or for whatever motive which you regard as appropriate. And last but not least, don't forget to come back to the channel and watch future videos. Thanks and goodbye.